Ladies and gents, welcome back. People have been distracted lately watching too much of the Emergencies Act inquiry or getting into other news. And well, the news media is clapping back. They're saying there's not enough fear in your life. We need to get back to those pandemic fears and look at possible mask mandates returning. And that's kind of the direction that we're going here. We have CTV News, Toronto. This is what Doug Ford said about whether mask mandates will return to Ontario.
Wear a mask when you can. You're within risk.
We're admitting a lot of kids 3 times more than we saw in previous years, even before COVID.
The recommendations and the warnings as a post-pandemic surge of respiratory cases in kids puts hospitals and families on the back foot.
Okay, so they're peddling the fear again, getting right back into it. Ontario Premier Doug Ford said Wednesday that he's encouraging Ontario residents to wear masks whenever they're in a situation that's less safe, but stopped short of committing to any sort of renewal of mask mandates in the province. And well, people are clapping back. We already have the Toronto Sun writing an article here. Mask mandates remain voluntary for now, says Premier Doug Ford. Well, for now, right? This is what they've always put on the back burner of, hey, do it or else we'll make it so you have to. Mandatory widespread masking isn't on the table right for Ontario right now. Premier Doug Ford said he was following the advice of Dr. Kieran Moore, Ontario Chief Medical Officer of Health, who has recommended masking in cases where people have medical conditions that make them especially vulnerable to COVID-19 or if social distancing is not possible. I've always said from day one, I'll always listen to Dr. Moore's advice, Ford said Wednesday, and give the advice she's giving to everyone. Wear a mask when you can. The premier said he intends on to get the flu shot and a 4th dose of COVID-19 vaccine. Old guys like me, I'm not chancing it, Ford says. There have been calls for some in the medical community for a return to mandatory masking in response to the fall respiratory illness season. Now, we've always had the fall respiratory illness seasons. This is not new. COVID is just part of it now. And while as it's moved its way through the population, it's just become something we have to live with. And this is what the news around the world is saying. We got to live with it. They got other problems elsewhere. We don't need this here in Canada. Most recent update from Public Health Ontario says that there has been a gradual increase in COVID-19 cases since early September. In the last week of October, PHO reported 473 hospital admissions, down from 569 the previous week. So, well, that that increase was something that happened before. Now, we have Rupa Subramanya on Twitter putting it out there, imposing on millions of children an intervention that provides little discernible benefit on the grounds that we have not yet gathered solid evidence of negative effects violates the most basic tenet of medicine. First, do no harm. And this is in response to CP24's top story. Toronto's doctors urgently explore reissuing mask mandates, especially in schools. This is the direction they're going. This is the acceleration of how the media works. Drum it up slowly, and then you're that frog that's boiled in the pot. The foundation of medical and public health intervention should be that they work, not that we have insufficient evidence to say whether they're harmful. Continued mandatory masking of children in schools fails this test. And here's that article here. Top story: Toronto top doctor urgently explore reissuing mask mandates, especially in schools. And it's just cruelty. It's cruelty. We all saw our kids have to go to schools with these masks on. We're no longer in this state. When the Spanish flu was over, they didn't drag it out for a decade. It was quickly, as soon as it was done, let's get back to normal life. But this is the direction that they're wanting to take people. Scrolling down in this original article from CTV News, The question about possible return to masking in schools comes as doctors warn about a perfect storm. Scary words again. The perfect storm of increasing respiratory illness at school as schools resume and people start spending more time indoors for the winter. At a meeting Tuesday of Ontario's Board of Health, Medical Officer of Health, Dr. Eileen DeVilla, said the city's continuing to follow the provincial guidelines around masking, but remains ready to implement masking guidelines for schools if conditions shift. Always leaving that on the table, keeping that out there. A number of experts have been calling for a return to mask mandates in some settings as respiratory illness increases, especially in light of overcrowding at hospital emergency departments. Well, do you think the overcrowding is maybe another issue? Maybe we're not spending our money wisely. There are currently few settings in the province where masks are still mandatory. And well, you know what? We are still one of the only places in the world that hasn't let people go back to work. I think they went down with a heavy hand. They pushed it too far when it came to medical professions. They pushed it too far. The vaccine mandates, the rhetoric around it, that they have to have it. They can't go to work without it. They're the reason why people are getting sick, and we know that not to be the case anymore. But because they push such harsh rhetoric, they have to keep on pushing. They won't step back from where they are. But this has been the warning. This has been the warning from a lot of people out there giving commentary like myself that when they suspend these mandates, it's only just a suspension. They were ramping things up, but just prior to suspension of the mandates, of course, the suspension, people are speculating that they suspended it only because of the lawsuits that were coming their way. Now that that's been declared moot in a court, we're waiting on whether those lawsuits may go forward, because there is obviously an appeal on that and it's going to a higher court, but we're still waiting on that. And in the meantime, they could always bring mandates back. Now, don't forget that we're not talking about fully vaccinated anymore. People are not considered fully vaccinated. They're considered either up to date or they're not. This is the language that they've been using from the federal government. And that's where we're at. So first come the mask mandates, and then come back the vaccine mandates and all of the infrastructure that we spent so much time getting rid of through protest and whatnot, putting videos out on the internet is getting the word out as much as we can. So keep the pressure on everyone, and hopefully we can deal without the heavy hand of the government pushing down on us for common cold. Anyway, we'll see you in the next one. Keep on trucking.